Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Jessica Friedman. We are just going to wait for people to tune in. If you could let me know if you could hear me, that would be terrific. Hello, everybody. I hope everyone's doing well. I can't believe it's almost August. The summer is flying by. Just amazing. So I hope everyone's having a good summer. I hope Delta variant is not, affecting anybody, although it looks like we could be in for a third COVID wave. So fingers crossed on that, especially for everyone who's going back to school. Certainly we don't need any more school closures or any virtual classes. So we're going to keep our fingers crossed that, things don't move in the wrong direction. Anyway, right after our last office hours, which was 2 weeks ago because I was not here last week, we found out from one of our students who, was really is a fantastic applicant, that they got into GW for medical school. So that was really good news. Certainly, there's not that much more waitlist movement at this stage. For medical school applicants, but every once in a while there are sort of some few that kind of come in here and there. So that was really happy news. We're really excited to hear about that. And we are getting ready with our residency applicants, because the residency match for next year will soon be in full swing. Residency applications will not be getting submitted to programs. Programs can't start reviewing those until the end of September. So that is a change that stayed with us post-COVID. And so, we do expect that students are going to be getting started on those a little bit later, but please don't drag your feet. And in preparation for that, I have just started reviewing all of the 2021, the most recent data from the most recent match in detail. And it's enlightening some of the trends that I'm seeing, and I do hope to be putting up a video very soon about those trends. And that will be helpful not only to those applicants who are applying this year, but also for those who might be applying in the future, because trends are trends and they will continue what we are seeing. So I think that would actually be some very useful information for everybody, whether you are currently a medical student, whether you're an aspiring pre-med. It always helps to kind of understand the landscape. When you get into medical school, that's your first step to getting a residency. So it's always good to kind of know what's ahead and to understand what you're going to have to be doing to be competitive for the next stage of your education and your training and your career. So that's been a lot of fun for me because I just love reviewing data. So since we're, we have some people now watching, I'm just going to introduce myself. Just for those of you who don't know me, my name is Dr. Jessica Friedman. I am a physician, former residency director, former medical school admissions officer. I did a lot of work at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai, and I'm also the founder of MedEdits Medical Admissions. So if you, for any reason, do not subscribe to our YouTube channel, although I suspect that most of you do, if you're here, I encourage you to go ahead and subscribe to our channel so you can be notified of when we do post new videos. I've been a little slow on posting videos just because we've been so busy with our students. So I apologize for that. So I encourage everybody to, ask as many questions as you'd like. I am here to answer your questions. Of course, I know a lot of the questions that students are asking right now. So, if you don't have any questions, I, of course, can just talk about medical admissions for hours. So, but I would be happy to, to answer any questions anyone has. So please don't be shy and please post your questions. We are also hearing a lot from Bsmd applicants right now, because obviously the next season of college, applicants are getting ready to apply to college and to Bsmd programs in the fall and in the winter, depending on what those students are applying for. If you are applying early decision to college, you probably are not applying to Bsmd programs. And the college landscape has definitely changed in terms of things being test optional, You know, the level of competitiveness, I think the level of competitiveness for Bsmd programs has not changed significantly, but for those students who are applying to both regular four-year universities as well as you know, Bsmd programs, you know, certainly things have changed a bit with the test optional landscape, and there are a lot of, you know, different questions that students have now about that process. So certainly I am actually learning a lot more about the college admissions and about Bsmd admissions and about some of the different approaches, which those approaches to how to approach college essays and college applications is very, very different than how you approach a medical school application and how you approach a residency application. So it's very interesting, you know, as I do learn more about admissions throughout my career, kind of understanding the evolution of every stage of education and, you know, and how those admissions processes vary with each stage. So don't think that sort of what you have learned during one stage, you can kind of apply to the next stage. There are some lessons that you might learn that you can apply, but there are a lot of nuances with every, you know, new stage of admissions. Okay, so let's go ahead, let's get started. I'm thinking of getting some help reviewing my secondaries. Is it too late to get a package through MedEdits? No, Naz, it is not too late. We definitely have students who at this stage, if they haven't worked with us on a primary application, they may work with us on all of their secondary applications, most of their secondary applications, or even just a couple that are very important to them. And we, you know, we also have students who, you know, who at this stage start working with us for interview preparation. You know, so we actually have a couple of students who already have medical school interviews. It is super, super early in the process. So I don't want to sort of freak anybody out by extending that good news because it's not typical. The vast majority of our students are completing secondaries right now and are, you know, actively in the process. We have a few people who have just submitted primary applications. It is a little bit late, but it's not a deal breaker if you're submitting at this point, but make sure you get, you know, a very early start on your secondaries if you are only now submitting your primary application. So hello from France, Camille, nice to see you. Okay, does a W on my transcript affect my application? One withdrawal on your application really doesn't affect things. Now, it starts to affect things if you have multiple withdrawals, okay? It may also affect things if that withdrawal sort of comes within the context of lower grades, right? So let's say you have a bunch of C's on your transcript or even a bunch of, you know, B's, B minuses and a withdrawal in the same semester. You know, somebody might say, okay, what went on that semester? And they will assume something went on that semester. So medical school admissions committees, you know, they want to give you the benefit of the doubt. So if there's something that kind of stands out, you know, in a bad way, they're going to say, like, I wonder what happened there. And they'll almost be looking for some type of explanation if, you know, there's something that really stands out. But I don't consider one kind of lower grade or one withdrawal to stand out. That doesn't stand out. That's just sort of an outlier. So an outlier is different than, you know, kind of a trend, right? Okay, so for Bsmd, you touched a little bit on the essay. Yes, you did hear right. Can you guide me more on the Bsmd topic? So if you're applying for Bsmd, you are filling out two primary applications, right? So you're filling out the Common App or the Coalition App, and as well, you are filling out the MD specific application for the medical school. So the MD specific application for the medical school is going to the medical school. So for those essays, we encourage students to take a very direct approach, to really look at the prompt. They want to understand that you know what it means to be a physician and that you are very, you know, clear and level-headed and mature, and that you know, kind of know what you're getting yourself into, right? And you're really committed to this, because committing to a career in medicine at the age of 17 or 18, you know, it really takes a high degree of maturity and focus, right? So they want to know that. But for the undergraduate portion of the application, when you're talking about the 650-word essay, I have found that there are two main approaches that students will take to that essay. One is more of an experience-based approach that focuses more on an achievement, okay? But I find that most colleges prefer sort of more of like a day in the life of type of approach. So they want to understand kind of, just a typical life, moment, right? Something that happened that's, kind of more representative of who you are, what your values are, what your ideals are, how you think, how you react to things, right? So they want to kind of really kind of get to the essence of, what makes this person who they are. All right. I encourage students to read the New York Times college essays that are posted every year, just because I feel that those kind of really are typical for what college admissions officers are looking for when it comes to the primary application. Or the Common App. They don't really call it the primary application in college. The other thing to keep in mind is that if you're applying to Bsmd programs, the vast majority of those programs are not affiliated with extremely competitive colleges, right? So with the exception of, the Brown program, most of them, the colleges are not going to be difficult for a typical Bsmd student to get accepted to. The hard part of that process is going to be getting into the MD portion, right? So if you are additionally applying to some highly selective colleges, though, in addition to Bsmd programs, that's when you really want to make sure that your Common App essay is something that's going to make you stand out, okay? Okay, so what is a good school to ED to if you are applying to Bsmd? Well, that really depends if you, ED is binding, right? So when you're applying early decision to a school, if you get accepted to that school early decision, it's a binding commitment, right? As opposed to early action or restrictive early action, those are not binding commitments. So for students who really want to apply early, the only real option that I can think of off the top of my head is the Brown program, because both of those application processes are within the same institution. There probably are others that I'm not thinking of, but if you're applying to multiple Bsmd programs, then you want to think very carefully about your early decision application, because if you get into that school, then you can't apply to any more schools, right? So you want to think about that carefully. Okay, let's just see what else here. Okay. All right. How successful are students personally that took an expensive prep course, Kaplan, and matriculating into medical school? Would you recommend taking one? It's really a personal decision, Anthony. We find that students do well with all types of preparation, and this is why we don't recommend a specific type of preparation. Some students do very well with courses like Kaplan, like Princeton Review, right? We don't find a huge difference in, sort of the bigger, well-known courses that have been around for a long time, because the content that you're studying for these exams has not changed significantly, in the past couple of years since the Mcat was revamped in 2015. So any of them, honestly, are probably good if you do well with a big prep, kind of course. Other students will do very well with tutoring. Some students definitely prefer kind of one-on-one tutoring and targeted prep. And then there are some students who just do very well by prepping on their own and by using, question banks and things of that nature. So it really depends on what worked for you in the past and how you study and how, sort of what path leads to success. Now, the way that we've typically kind of, help students with this is we'll say to them, well, how did you prepare for your SAT, ACT? What worked for you? And, most students kind of know what approach worked for them for that test. And if they got the results that they were aiming for. Now, that's obviously going to change as we move into a test optional world, when students sort of, don't necessarily feel as it's as necessary for them to get a high test score on those tests. Then, in essence, they're going to be starting from square one when they're prepping for their MCAT in terms of figuring out what the best way for them to prepare is. But we find that that's a very individualized choice. There sort of isn't a one size fits all answer to that. The one thing that I would be wary of are newer courses, or, you know, going to programs that haven't been in this arena for as long as others, right? Because, you know, those programs haven't necessarily tested their question banks and all of that kind of stuff. So, you know, if you're going to a relatively new course, you want to kind of find out, well, how long have they been in existence, right? The one thing you can say about Kaplan and Princeton, you know, Princeton Review, is they've been in this business for a very, very long time, right? So to me, that's kind of comforting. Okay. So when would an application be considered a late application? Jason, I'm assuming that you're talking about a late application to medical school. We are getting on the cusp of an application being late. So generally speaking, when people call us in August and they say, I want to apply to medical school, we say, you know what? You'd really be better off at this point waiting until next year. So we're right on the cusp of you being a late applicant, right? We're talking about peak processing times right now. And so, you know, you really want to, you know, question, is it worth applying to medical school, assuming that you're applying to allopathic medical schools. If you're applying to DO medical schools, those timelines are a little bit more flexible. Those aren't, you're not necessarily as late for osteopathic medical schools, but certainly for allopathics, we're getting on the late side. What is a 92 GPA on a 4.0 scale? I would say a 92 is an A minus, so that would be a 3.7. I just got a 1 on my Casper. Would that influence what my secondaries are sent to? So if you can't get a 1, I assume that you're in the first quartile for Casper. So the way that Casper this year is sending out results to students, and they're letting students know what quartile they are in. So you're either in, you know, obviously the first, second, third, or fourth quartile. So if you're saying 1, I'm assuming you're in the first quartile. We do not find that Casper is, you know, really impacts admissions all that significantly. It's kind of used as a way to sort of corroborate other information in your application, you know, but we have students, you know, who didn't really feel great about Casper, who've done fine. Casper is something that is rated by civilians, you know, and, you know, having former Casper raters on our team, you know, and kind of understanding how they do those ratings, you know, this is not something that we feel admissions committees would put a lot of emphasis on. Now, the only way that they would is, let's say your letters of recommendation suggest that you have interpersonal problems, or, you know, you have ethical, you know, questionable ethics or something of that nature. And then you're in the first quartile in Casper. So that Casper score sort of, you know, supports what your letters of recommendation would say. That's when Casper can kind of, you know, so to speak, hurt you. But assuming that your letters of recommendation are excellent, most people who write letters of recommendation would never choose to write a letter unless they feel they can write a strong letter. You know, then being in the first quartile is not going to hurt you. Okay. Do medical school application review consideration part for Bsmd usually happen on a rolling basis? Yes, they do. They happen on a rolling basis, but all admissions results are usually released at the same time. So, you know, and there are deadlines. So it's not rolling in the same way that medical school admissions is rolling. So it's a little bit different. It's not really rolling. Okay. GN says, which schools I send my second? No, you should send your secondaries to everybody regardless of your Casper score. How competitive are early assurance programs? For example, the USF program, Rutgers Robert Wood John's program. There's also FlexMed. Tufts also has one. There's another one I'm escaping me right now. Those early assurance programs you apply while you are usually a sophomore in college. Some of those programs are only for students that go to that specific college, while others are open to everybody. Those programs are super competitive, most of them. The ones that are internal programs are, you know, and only take their own students, those are a little bit less competitive. The ones that are open to everybody, you know, those are super competitive programs. Do competitive medical schools have a preference for clinical work in a hospital compared to a rehabilitation center or nursing home? Victoria, no, they really don't. As long as you have some type of clinical exposure where you're working with patients, you're working in a clinical setting, you understand either hospital operations, office operations, it really can be in any setting. Okay. So, we've actually been, hearing more and more about students doing very competitive things. I mean, very variety of different things. It used to be that students would only work as scribes or EMTs, but we're hearing about, students working in hospice, working in nursing homes, working as OR techs, so students are doing a whole variety of things to get that clinical exposure. And, all of these are excellent opportunities. I wouldn't say that one is better than the other. I'm working on my CNA certification and I'm looking to apply. That would be terrific if you get CNA certification and you do that before applying to medical school. That would be fabulous clinical experience. Why do some early assurance programs limit the colleges that can apply? Just because some early assurance programs are only for their own students. That's why. It sort of is like, oh, well, if you're affiliated with this undergraduate university and that undergraduate university has a medical school, they will offer that because it really is a privilege, right, to get into medical school early. And so that's why that's just sort of how some of these programs operate. And it goes back probably a while, why they were initially instituted. It will be interesting to see if some of those programs open up. Certainly, I think like the FlexMed program at Mount Sinai gets the most phenomenal applicants that they sort of, get to commit to their medical school very early. So more medical schools may kind of pick up on this and start to have early assurance programs, who knows? But so far that hasn't happened. And the FlexMed has been around in different iterations for quite a while now. So who knows? Okay, can I matriculate with a 3.5 GPA and a 506 Mcat? What are my chances realistically? Would I need to retake the Mcat? A 506, depending on your demographic. If you are a majority applicant, a 506 is not going to be competitive for allopathic medical schools in the US, okay? If you're looking at osteopathic medical schools, that's a completely different story, and certainly that's competitive. If you are an underrepresented minority, a 506 might be competitive, also depending on what state you're from. So we would have to look at, these different aspects of your background and of your candidacy to determine. But for majority applicants, when students come to us and they have a 506 to a 508, even a 509 now, we're a little hesitant. That it's going to be tough. I mean, in the new Mcat in 2015, when initially those results started rolling in, a 510 was pretty safe. But now that the test prep materials have improved and everything else, the average Mcat for matriculated students has bumped to above a 511. So, we always feel kind of better when students have around a 511 or higher. We feel that that's, kind of a safer number to ensure that a student is going to be accepted to medical school. But there are so many other factors that, that impact your success and that determine your success that we can never sort of, make a judgment call on that just based on the metrics alone. We definitely have students who have lower metrics who are accepted to medical school. But they have other things going for them, right? They have other things that are, kind of enhancing their candidacy. So like the student who, just 2 weeks ago got into GW did not have the highest Mcat. One of the reasons why they were still on wait lists, but ultimately got in because they had other things that, were working in their favor. Does EMS count as clinical experience? Does it compensate for a lack of hospital volunteering? Absolutely. EMS is a great experience. And in fact, I would consider that a better experience than hospital volunteering. Often hospital volunteering is a very passive activity, where you don't really have a lot of patient interaction. And definitely, the trends that we're seeing is that medical schools are less interested in passive activities at this point. So those passive activities are definitely, still important, but they're not the most important, okay? CPR, BLS, lifeguard, are those any good when applying to Bsmd? I mean, they're fine experiences. Lifeguarding is a pretty typical experience for a high school student. So again, wonderful to have on your application. Shows, you know, some initiative, shows that you're able to take on responsibility. It's not going to make or break your candidacy simply because it's such a common thing for students to do during their summers to lifeguard. And just having the certification also isn't really going to help. So if you're going to get the certification, work, you know, so we'd want you working at a camp or a community pool or something, you know, in order to, you know, demonstrate those skills. I'm currently a high schooler going into my senior year. You mentioned the Casper exam. How helpful, harmful is it? And do we need to take it before medical school? The Casper exam is something called a situational judgment test. Do not stress about the Casper exam. And honestly, Nikhil, by the time you get to applying to medical school, assuming that you're going through 4 years of college, maybe a gap year, who knows if Casper will still even be a thing. Things change so quickly, and you know how students prep for these tests is changes, and just don't even think about Casper. You should be thinking, if you're a high school, you're going to senior year, you should be thinking about, you know, working on your Common App, working on your Common App essay, working on your Common App activities. You have so few characters to write those, your supplemental essays, your first semester, senior year grades, which impact outcomes, and whatever it is that you're doing this summer, right? So, and your letters of recommendation. So please, Nikhil, don't worry about Casper yet. Plenty of time, plenty of time. Okay, what do you think of the Sophie Davis program? Terrific program. Definitely a great program. Okay, when writing AACOMAS entries for work and activities and the personal statement, which sections are okay to copy over from Amcas, and what do you recommend changing specifically for AACOMAS? Great question, Josh. For AACOMAS entries, we recommend taking your Amcas descriptions and using those, okay, for the purposes of AACOMAS. You might have to trim a little bit, but you shouldn't have to trim that much, okay? And then as far as the personal statement, we think it is perfectly fine to use the same personal statement that you used for MCAS. And this frankly is why AACOMAS, I think it was 2 years ago, increased their personal statement limit from 5,000 to 5,300 characters. So it would match up with the Amcas personal statement, because the osteopathic medical schools know that the vast majority of their applicants are also applying to all allopathic medical schools. Okay, you on secondary essays for osteopathic medical schools, you will be getting questions about why osteopathic medicine. Okay, so you don't need to worry about sort of including that information in the personal statement. Now, if you wanted to write a distinct personal statement for AACOMAS, because let's say you had a lot of experience working directly with an osteopathic physician, you had a real understanding of the practice of holistic medicine, alternative therapies, manipulative therapy. So if you have experiences that would specifically appeal to osteopathic medical physicians, then by all means you could write a new personal statement. But we don't think it's absolutely necessary to do that. It's a really personal preference. I will be applying next cycle, but got my letters of recommendation and committee letter last year. Do I need to get them redated? Pranesh, I would be concerned if those letters were 2 years old. So yes, I would get them not only redated, but I might also get them updated. And I would want to know what else you've been doing in the past 2 years. So it would seem almost a little bit odd if you had been out of school, let's say, for 2 years, or if you'd gotten all those letters from people from 2 years ago. I'm assuming you've been working or something of that nature. So, but you definitely want a letter, at least one letter, to kind of represent what you've been doing in the past 2 years. If you've been working and let's say you got those letters at the end of your senior year of college, then you may not need to get them redated, simply because I think that would be pretty well understood. But we would want to know more specifics about that in terms of really recommending what to do. When submitting a LOR to AACOMAS, should we submit all strong references or forward a few letters of rec throughout the cycle? I recommend submitting all of your strong references at the get-go. If you have additional letters of recommendation that can be sent in over the course of the application cycle, different schools have different policies about that. This is definitely something that we recommend students do. But if they're all ready to go when you submit, you should just send them all when you're ready to submit. Absolutely. I am Victoria, I am volunteering as a home health aide. That's awesome, to provide patient emotional support. As a volunteer, I'm only interacting with the patient. Is this too passive an experience? Absolutely not. That's a great experience. I love that. And you know, and that's, I mean, you're providing emotional support. I realize you probably aren't supposed to be offering any medical care, but I'm sure you're doing some things like, you know, I don't know, helping them to the bathroom or changing bedpans, doing the things that aren't so glamorous. And that's always wonderful, right? To show that you're somebody who, like, when you're walking, it always made me crazy when I would be, you know, working in the clinical environment and a patient would be struggling with a bedpan and I would see a student or a resident just walk by and like just not help the patient. Like, help the patient, you know? So it's good to be that person, right? To show that, you know, it's not as if you're above something, right? Okay, in Texas, what are some of the factors a high schooler would need to focus on to get into pre-med? If my GPA is a 3.87 and I'm 13th percentile in the class, that's terrific. So if you're asking about getting into college as a pre-med, a 3.87 is a great GPA. I'm assuming if you're in a school that offers AP classes, that you are in AP classes. The key thing to getting into a good college is to take the most rigorous curriculum available to you, to take all 5 courses, all 4 years of high school, and then of course to have some strong extracurriculars if you've taken standardized tests, to have those standardized tests be as competitive as they can be. Oh, good, Josh. I'm glad you're relieved. That's great. Okay, Anthony Price, I work as an anesthesia tech. That's wonderful. That's great too. I've witnessed more than 500 surgeries. However, the MSAR data shows that students who volunteer matriculate far more than students that work. Far more students that work. Oh, okay. So I don't totally understand this question. But having 500, if you witness 500 surgeries, you've been working for many, many hours. That's wonderful. Realize you can't have tons of hours in every category. No one expects you to, okay? So the fact that you've witnessed more than 500 surgeries suggests to me that you've had hundreds of hours of working as an anesthesia tech. So that's impressive. That's great, okay? Watch my video on extracurricular activities for medical school, because it kind of like goes over this in terms of how many hours you need, and also kind of highlights the fact that you can't be stellar in everything and nobody expects you to be, right? So you want to have a few things that you kind of stand out at, but you know, you don't have to stand out at absolutely everything. Okay, so I think that that is it for tonight. And I thank you all for tuning in. I encourage you again to subscribe to my channel. I do hope to be posting more videos soon. Again, it's just been, you know, we've just been so busy with our students, and, you know, I don't like just putting up junk. So, you know, I want to make sure that everything that we put on YouTube is quality. So be careful what you listen to that you find on YouTube and Reddit and everywhere else, just because there's just so much garbage out there and so much misinformation from people who really haven't been there and don't have the experience to be giving advice all the time. So just be careful who you listen to, okay? You're all good, analytical, critical thinkers, so I know that you can do that because you're all educated that way, and you all are, you know, are sort of the social media generation, so you know not to believe everything, you know, that you hear. So awesome. And office hours are every Thursday. I will be going away for a couple of weeks later in August, and but we will let you know when that will be. So, but I will be here next week. Okay. Thank you, Victoria. Thank you for the compliment. Okay.